Welcome to the Center for Diversity Leadership, where we are supporting school leaders together across the nation as they create school cultures that ensure all students are seen, valued, celebrated, and heard. I am Dr. Ryan Daniel.
And I'm Xavier Reed.
And we are your fellows in the work. Today, we are diving into how school leaders can strengthen their equity-focused leadership as they reflect on the closing of a school year. As we prepare for the season of reflection, also known as summer planning, this is a great time to assess your commitment to being an equity-focused leader. Xavier, right now, this is that time where you are kind of wrapping up a school year, starting a new one, and really being super reflective. Before we even get into it, how do you reflect if like a school year is successful or not?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, one of the things, for school buildings, especially for principals, that can, be draining is continuing to only look at certain data points in regards to your, success as a school. And and not looking at like the many wins or the many successes that happen within your school. Because there's good things that are happening every day. And it's important to be reflective on that. It's important to recognize that, not just with yourself as a leader, but it is also important to do that with staff, because we know that teachers, we know that office staff, we know that we all care so much, and I would say educators have a very high standard for themselves, and we can get caught into that spot where it feels like we're not meeting our goal, we're not doing enough, or we could be doing better. There's always going to be things that we can improve on. That's just the nature of life. That's the nature of the work that we do. But there are steps that we've taken, and I would say for myself personally, I'm a very reflective person. Probably too, to be maybe too reflective. I think, I'm constantly just thinking about a conversation that I had with somebody, or interaction that I had with the student, or just different things, and how, yeah, how I, appreciated how I approached that, or how maybe I could have done that differently. And so in regards to success, I really have learned to be able to highlight those many successes for me and for our team. And that's something that we really try to talk about throughout the year. What would you say is something that you do?
I think the same thing. Like I think so often, I love what you said about reflecting on all of the wins and looking at different data points. Because I think we get into that place of just solely focusing on like assessment data and achievement data. But in this sense, right now, like, even when I think about equity and, how we're prioritizing what equity looks like and feels like in our school, I think sometimes we forget to reflect on that. Like we start reflecting on that when something has happened, like when there has been some unrest, if there has been some trauma or some, it's just some challenges. I think that's when we start to be reflective, but at that point we're kind of being reactive. And so I know for me that I have really taken all school year to just every month kind of having asking myself some reflecting questions, and some of them we'll dive in today. But just looking at each month as a whole, individually, then in totality, and really looking at like how can we continue to push ourselves to grow next school year. Like what can I do more of as a school leader to support my community, to make sure that all stakeholders are being supportive. And so let me ask you a question, Xavier.
Yep.
How does your personal experiences kind of shape how you have approached equity in your school or in your school district?
Yeah, I would say, my personal experiences have shaped it a ton. I think even my early on experiences as an educator have continue to um, kind of identify and direct kind of the way that I move in this position as school principal. Um, Being a student, a Black student that has grown up in Minnesota, and now being a leader of a building in Minnesota, being well aware of of a lot of things that when you're a kid, you're not aware of inequities in the way that you are, as an adult. And so it's really helped me to be able to take a step back. And I think that you learn this approach is kind of going through life because even, from when I was an educator and I wasn't a parent to now being an educator and being a parent, that adds another layer to it, which I know that you understand having, your own children in your school building. And so I'm sure that helps to change your approach as well. But I would say my personal experience, you know, it's it has allowed me to look at, everything in our school building through an equity lens and asking that question, is this equitable? Is this for kids? What is this? Why are we making this decision? Is this for the best, is this the best decision for our school? This is the best decision for all students. Where are there opportunities and just kind of continue to be in that reflective state.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what we don't realize, and I think this is a great question for school leaders, like to put in, like, how does your experiences shape how you have approached equity? Because what we don't realize is that our experiences really shape our implicit biases. And sometimes in order to call them out, you like have to be reflective of them. And, very similar to you, I'm a product of my school district, and we have not been always the most sought after school district because of the narrative that has been kind of put out there about our school district. We are, a predominantly African American school district, the largest actually in our state, and I think that has shaped how I approach equity, because the diversity of staff has changed from when I was a student in our school district to it now. And I'm always thinking of, like, will my students have relationships with the teachers that are in front of them? If they are not from, they don't have the same backgrounds and walks of life. I think about those things, because I remember my teachers, they looked like me. And that helped with the relationship. But it also shaped me to be wanting to become a principal and to still be a principal here in, our school district, because the narrative is that you're not that successful depending on which high schools you went to. And I came from a high school that the narrative was you were not going to be that successful. So being able to be the counter story, but I think sometimes that gets in the way of me as a leader because I'm so focused on, like, can that teacher have a relationship with the student and build and like understand their background and their walks of life if they are from two different places. So like I've had to be very cognizant of how I'm making, and we've talked about this before, but what that shared language is of equity in my school, because I want to make sure that not only are my implicit biases not leading my work, but everyone else's isn't. Like, so doing a lot of work around, understanding student stories and where they come from. I know one thing that has really helped me, as I'm building the capacity of my staff around this, is at the beginning of the school year, we do a field trip around the neighborhoods because it is important for staff to understand where our students come from, like the neighborhoods, where they hang out at, how long it takes them to get to school. I think that that stuff is important to understanding, like, how a student shows up every single day. And that has been one of the kind of ways that I've built the capacity of my staff, so that we are becoming more equity focused. What about you? Like, what are some other ways that you've built your capacity of your teachers to become like equity focused in your building?
Mhm. I think data is always something that we can lean on. I think for educators, it's something that's concrete. It's something that you can't really argue with or deny. And
Numbers
so,
don't lie.
yeah, numbers don't lie. And so, for me, one of the things that we did earlier this year, one of our stories here is just the dramatic change that we've seen in our student body since our school opened up 25 years ago. And so, since that point in time, we've doubled in size. So we went from being a school of about 750 kids to now we are 1,550 kids, which even for 25 years, that's a dramatic change and shift, for the school. And we have a lot of people, even one of my associate principals is one of those staff members that have been here since it opened 25 years ago. And he was a teacher at that time. And being able to understand, like, even though those shifts were gradual, it was about 100, 200 kids every year. It starts to creep up on you. And with that change in size, also we became a lot more diverse. We had a lot, our student body looked a lot different. And so what I did earlier this year was I worked with our district office and pulled data. I couldn't get back 25 years ago, but I did get back to about 15 to 20 years ago, and saw like the demographic shifts, and the size, the size of the student body. And I mean, 15 years ago, we didn't even have an EL program in our school. Now we have the biggest EL program, in our district at the middle school level. That's a significant shift. We have a lot more Black students in our building. We have a lot more American Indian students in our building. And so when we talk about equity, it starts to shift the conversation because we can't approach how we're educating students how we once did, because the student that we're looking at and that we're working with is a lot different than what they were when we first started. And so for me, I have leaned more on, obviously I have the personal experience and I have people in our building that have that personal experience, but I've also, I think, since becoming a leader, have leaned more in the direction of, let's just talk about facts. Let's just
Yeah.
talk about, what's going on and what's in front of us. It's not the only piece of the story, but it is a big piece of the story. And so let's start the conversation there, and then we can, game plan from that point.
Yeah, I know. I think for me and one of our partners, MAEC, the Mid Atlantic um consortium, what they gave us is this idea of kind of reflecting on a particular kind of place in your building, doing like an audit. And I think when we talk about like how do you build the capacity of your staff to go from beyond like doing equity to actually like being equity, I think a lot of it has to be modeling from the school leader, and just understanding that in order for people to be equitable and to display equity, they have to kind of get out of their own mindsets or shift their mindsets. That I think that is the most difficult thing as a school leader, when you realize that you can't change everyone's mindset,
Mhm.
and of how they, view students and cultural identity and voice and individuality, and like what that equity mindset really is. So I know for me, really being able to kind of build teachers' capacity around equity really comes from me modeling what it is that I want them to do. If I'm saying building relationships with every all of your students is important, then I'm taking the time to build relationships with each of my staff members, right?
Mhm.
Because what I'm trying to do is model with them what I want them to do with their students. Taking time to get to know them, being
Mhm.
very intentional about the teams that I build together. If I notice, as I shared, I have a high Filipino staff. But if I notice that I have a Filipino teacher that she works well when she has a Filipino teammate, but not the same way when she has an African American teammate, then there's conversations that we have to have. And I think in order to build the capacity, in order to move like the needle, you have to be, as a school leader, you got to be reflective on the type of conversations that you need to have, with your staff. What are some systems or maybe processes or structures you've used to kind of support your teams, either your grade level teams, your content teams? to be a more equitable school?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's been a lot around what we've done here. Has been around a lot around like mindset and setting that mindset about just how we think of our students, how we talk about our students, how we talk about families, just kind of setting that. And so we adopted building norms, a couple of years ago, and so the building norms are something that, align with us being a student-centered school. We are here for our students. That is who, we serve, our families we serve as well, obviously. But, that to me has been systemic in a way of there's an expectation of how we talk about kids, and there's an expectation of how we don't. And just going down that path of negativity. And so we know that education is a stressful field to work in. We know that there's different challenges that come up, but our babies can't control any of that. And so understanding we have to meet students where they are, and we need to help them to rise up to the occasion and assist them in that. And so for me, when I think about systems, I think about that. I also think about, how we have tried to support teams in our building with just different documentation tools, different ways of being able to work with different families from different communities. I think that we have a lot of people on our support staff who have so much experience with working, with diverse, students and families in different settings, and it's been really helpful for them to partner with some of our teachers who either are newer to the profession or are just have never been in this situation before. And so I think that feels supportive when we do it alongside of them, and maybe we might make a phone call together. We might invite a parent in and be present there for the meeting with them. But those have been pieces that I feel like we have where we've taken steps in being able to do that.
I like that piece that you said about like how are we talking like about students,
Yeah.
like what we saying about students. I think that's something that's really really key that we often forget about as educators is like there's power in words, and in those conversations and meetings, just very similar, just making sure that we are putting protocols and procedures in place that meet the needs of all students, that we're not catering to a particular type of student, group of student. I very quickly I can think of when it comes to like honor roll assemblies and awards, I'm asking questions of like which students are getting like honor roll. Like, oh, I noticed that this homeroom received a reading awards, but you didn't give any out to your other homeroom. Like, let's have questions. Like, let's have conversations around that. And I think asking these tough questions, um, no doubt, is uncomfortable. But these are those kind of questions that will lead to some like action, and educational equity truly requires us to kind of be uncomfortable sometimes and asking those reflective questions. So as we wrap up, I think collectively as school leaders, we know we won't be able to break down these barriers if we don't continue to like examine them and reflect on them, not just with ourselves, but with our school community as a whole. And that's the only way that we can kind of disrupt inequities that have been a part of the K through 12, educational system for years. Xavier just shared of how his school community has changed over the last 25 years. Same for my student population and my school has significantly changed over the last 3 years. And we can't continue to do the same thing. So, as school leaders, we hope that you were able to get one or two questions that you can put in your toolbox as you're kind of reflecting and wrapping up a successful school year and getting ready to rock out a new school year. Thank you so much for listening in to us continue to kind of come in and hear from the Center for Diversity Leadership, but we're really making sure that school leaders are equipped with all of the tools that they need to be successful, to making sure that their students and their staff feel seen, feel valued, and feel heard.
See you soon.